And the standards, early learning standards committee actually has one shared and then a couple of unique proposals that are in here. If you go to page 4 of this document, is this one people have? Yeah. Activity 6 is actually something that was shared between early learning standards and access and finance, yeah, which was a goal of trying to get more children into programs in the first place. And so this was, it resulted in this discussion of the whole issue of trying to make it easier to layer funds. And so what's in here is a shorter version of what came out in the proposal about trying to look at the question of both studying what the models are for layering funds and also, in this particular case, putting out an RFP to actually have some communities experiment with that graded and layering of funds. And then the two that are unique are captured on number 4, standards. One of the things, and I think you touched on this, Julie, that was a challenge in terms of the committee, because of course some of the things we're talking about here are huge, long-reaching, time frame items, and yet the criteria that we had to wrestle with as a committee in terms of what went into this proposal were things like impactfulness of the strategy. It had to be short, fairly short term in the way you can make impact right away, good use of the dollars. Fits with the strategic plan, of course, that there isn't, ideally looking at things where there isn't another funding source, and where work is a foundation for other work. So there were a lot of things I think we would have loved to have tackled, and a lot of changes, particularly around things like CCAP, that were long-term, and I don't think those ideas will be lots, and I hope maybe in a minute we'll talk about sort of the ongoing work. Sure. But, in terms of short-term, where we landed was this idea here first about the mentor and coaching, the fact that we still, after several years of trying to get providers familiar with things like the early childhood indicators of progress and the core competencies, feel like there's still a long way to go. And that in the experience has shown us that more one-on-one relationship-based professional development really probably has more promise than the typical standalone sessions. And so this was the idea of building on the mentoring and coaching approach to really enhance that understanding by practitioners of those tools, and to build on initiatives that have already been underway, not to recreate the wheel. And then the other piece really came out of the actual full council meeting, as I understand it, which even though there has been effort already underway with Department of Human Services and Department of Education, this is also, I think, calling that to the forefront, that there needs to be a look at this whole question of the program standards. If we're going to have a future quality rating improvement system, we're going to have to do something about, obviously, this idea of aligning the standards and where do we go. It's complicated by the fact that we're still in pilots, but I think people felt like it belonged in the plan in some way, shape, or form, so you see it reflected here. Okay?
Barbara, would you be able to take a stab at the professional development one? That's the one I feel like I probably know the least. I don't know if you feel like you know it any better than I do.
But there was nobody from here was been on the professional development committee.
Oh, I was going to say Michelle.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay,
Michelle. Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Would you wanna?
Go ahead.
Well, I haven't been participating in it. But how about if we just look at page 3? It's the activity 2, early childhood educators and care providers will be better prepared to have increased teaching skills. And that committee has come up with actually 3 proposals looking at evaluating the effectiveness and capacity of the 2- and 4-year institutes of higher education in terms of getting teachers prepared. Looking at the current Minnesota core competencies.
Well, with core competencies, we really thought that they needed to be updated and basically almost revised and make them more user-friendly. Because a lot of, especially family child providers, can't see themselves using the core competencies. They don't see where they fit into them, even though they do, but they can't see where their layers are. So we think that needs to be revised so that all practitioners can see themselves in them.
And then the next activity is looking at outreach strategies for the Minnesota Center for Professional Development Child Care Registry that Metropolitan State University has. Do some marketing around that to get providers enrolled in that.
Yes. Yes. Because there's a lot of out there with providers around Metro State's, professional development center development.
So, the council's work has really been focused on given the deadline of this, we've been really focused on getting these proposals put together, getting the kind of community buy-in that the committees can give us. And, hi Carol. You're on Access and Finance?
I am.
Do you want to say anything about that
I had
committee's
said I
work?
probably wouldn't make it because the county's still wrangling about its budget, but they're on break right now.
I saw emails this morning about it.
I can just make a brief comment.
Go ahead.
Access and Finance, one of the things that I think the piece of our proposal, other than what Ann already addressed, is on page 4, it's number 3, and it's activity number 5. I don't think we have another one in here, but I'm not sure. Part of what Access and Finance is responsible for doing is figuring out what it's going to cost to have the kind of an early childhood a complete early childhood system and access to it by everyone who would like to access it, particularly those at risk. So the thing we're recommending, we are already working on identifying what would be the components of a system, and it wouldn't be surprising to any of you, many of you have worked on the same committees I have to talk about what those things should be, and we're also reflecting the 10 essential elements. But what we have identified is the need for somebody to assist the committee in looking for and costing out, as we lay out the framework, to go and get the information to help us with costing out what those elements would cost, and there'll be sort of plan A, plan B kind of options, but so that ultimately we have a really solid, the committee as a whole has a really solid recommendation they can use regarding what all the elements of a system would look like, what they would cost, and then if you're needing to make choices, what each choice would cost, so that you can take one from column A and one from column B to start with, and start building. So I don't know if I've explained that very well, but that's what we recommended, that resources were needed.
So our goal to date has been to get the information together to put together these ARRA proposals, and from here the committees will continue to work alongside the council for the full 4 years of the council's work, which to me is just really a lovely way for our community of people invested in early childhood to really have a voice at the table. Our Early Learning Standards Committee, there is a lot of passion at that table about this work and a lot of knowledge. And so to be able to use that venue to bring the knowledge forward as we make recommendations at the council table itself, I think is really going to be the most effective way to make the kind of changes we need to make in the state. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. It's been, we've had to kind of regroup on my committee to figure out, okay, so much of our focus was on this ARA funding, and now we have to regroup and figure out, okay, what can we do next? How can we use this opportunity to have a further voice? And really it's about having a voice at the decision-making table of the council. The committees really have that opportunity to make recommendations that then as the council member I can bring forward. And the council members of the other committees can do the same. So, and we can bring those recommendations then forward to the governor and the legislature. So that's in a nutshell our work. Do you have any questions that those of us involved in it can answer?